let's talk about book talk. Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Adeline the French Fry, and in this video I'll be talking about Booktok books. But before we begin, I have to ask you to hit that like and subscribe button and comment down below if you want me to review or talk or make a video about anything you'd like to see. Now let's get into it. Book talk. As you should know, and if you don't, you are an uncultured swine, because it's very famous. Booktok is a vast part of TikTok, where dozens upon dozens of people recommend, review, and talk about books that they liked or didn't, or have a love-hate relationship with. And as I've read a few, today we'll be talking about the Booktok books I have read, whether I like them or not. So, to start off this video, we will be starting with The Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo, which is a part of the Grishaverse world that started with Shadow and Bone, which we will talk about in another video because that's a whole other thing that deserves its own video. Six of Crows follows six main characters, Kaz, Inej, Nina, Matthias, Wylan, and Chesper, who are all basically criminals in this town of Ketterdam, where fugitives, criminals, and other kinds of people run loose without a care and do terrible things. And basically the whole book is about multiple heists they have to perform, which starts out to get what they want, Kruger, which is money in the book, and ends up saving a lot of people and or the world, which wasn't their intention, but became their intention. Out of 5 stars, I give these books 4.5. I was kicking my feet and literally giggling stupidly for a lot of the time that I was reading this. And age rating, for these I'd say 14 to 15. That's when I read them fully for the first time, because when I was 12, I found it and tried to read it. This was before it was overly famous and I was like manipulated by people who said that it was good, and ended up never getting past the first chapter because, which disclaimer if you've never read it, both of these books start with a chapter and the point of view of a character never mentioned again, except maybe once for the entire rest of the book. But once you get past the first chapter, it becomes the best book you have literally ever read, and I will always recommend this to people. Always. Continuing on, the next book is Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, which is a series I think of 4 books, can't remember, but it's about a world that is divided by blood. The Silver Bloods have magical, fantastical powers like controlling metal and fire and stuff, and the Red Bloods have none. They are basically peasants among the silver upperclassmen. But everything changes when our main character, Mare Barrow, I think that's how you say her name, I have no idea, who is a red, discovers she has magic power, which is basically lightning. And a lot of stuff happens after that, but I won't spoil it for you because, honestly, it was a very cliche, normal, same plot for a fantasy book. However, it wasn't in a particularly bad way. In rating it, I have to say 3 stars because although it was good, and I genuinely love Victoria Aveyard, it could have been better. The age rating I'd say would be 13 to 14 up, because while the romance is clean, there are several references in it that are actually quite normal in a YA book. I don't think you'll ever read a YA book that doesn't have innuendo. Moving on, the next book I will be discussing is not actually a YA book, but I think a new adult book. And when I first read this, I didn't know that. I thought it was a YA book, so when I read it, I was very surprised. So it's definitely not meant for teenagers, but I read this when I was 14. And the book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which is about Adeline LaRue, who was born in the 1700s, and when forced to marry, she makes a deal with basically the devil so that she doesn't have to get married and she can be free to not married, or she wants to be married. But as usual, the deal gets twisted, and instead she does live forever, and she is free, but everyone forgets her. It's a rather sad and irritating thought to be forgotten by everyone you love, or even people you don't know. And there's more depth to this book that I don't quite know how to explain. You just have to read it. And while it was very good, the pacing was so slow that I got a bit bored on some parts. I've seen a lot of people hating on it, and I get why, and I respect their opinion. But this book wasn't terrible, and I definitely recommend it if you like this kind of stuff. Out of all, I'd rate it 3.5 stars out of 5. And the age rating is supposed to be for people 18 and up, I think, but it really depends on how mature of it as a teen. But it really depends on how mature you are as a teenager. Going into the next Booktok book, which is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Right. Which is a rather big book consisting of, I think, 804 pages, and follows a few important characters through a time where worms or dragons or something are threatening to destroy the world, and it's all about girl power and everything. And while it was a very good book from what I've read, it is a rather hard read for me. For one of the reasons is because it looks like such a big book that you lose interest easily, but I also think it reminds me of Tolkien with gay stuff, and I never liked any of J.R.R. Tolkien's books, which I will get into in another video before you start yelling at me for my opinion. I think this would be a great book for people who like fantasy written a bit like a mature classic, because while I did like this book, I haven't finished it yet, and I bought it in September. Yeah. But in overall, I'd rate it about 3 stars, and the age rating is for a more mature audience, but I can't pinpoint it. So I'd say about 16 to 18 and up, but like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, it depends on how mature as a teenager you are. Shatter Me by, I don't remember the author's name, which is a YA book about a sort of modern fantasy world where the main character, Juliet something, is locked up in a facility because she has a strange power where whoever she touches dies. So like that girl with the white strip in her hair from X-Men, but insane. And I never finished the book, and I can't really remember what happens in it, but it was pretty good. And because I haven't finished the first book, I feel like I can't properly rate it until I've read the whole series, which I am going to be reading after Christmas. And the real reason I want to read the whole series is because I heard a spoiler, which if you don't want a spoiler, jump forward and skip this part. And I heard a spoiler where Juliet ends up with the supposed bad guy. And I'm so excited about that because the moment Warner breathed into existence, I was in love with him. So what if he killed like 28 people? I love him, and still do. Besides, he has a tragic backstory. Who couldn't fall in love with that? So to conclude the rating of Shatter, get your butt out of my camera thing. Sorry, my cat. So to conclude the rating of Shatter Me, I'm giving the first book 3 stars, and it probably would be more if I actually remember what happened, besides the one whole page that literally just said insane about 1,000 times and was crossed out. So yeah. In age rating, I know later in the series it gets a bit more jalapeno, but I don't know how much, so I can't really give you an age rating. However, I do know it's YA, so it can't get that bad, I don't think. So I'd say, at least for the first book, 14 and 15 is a good age to read it. Before we begin discussing this next book, I want you to know that if you like this book, that is your choice, and I can definitely understand why. However, This book was not for me, and I do not want you to feel like I'm hating on a book that you love, even though I am. I am not hating on you, darlings. Now, introducing the only book that I've hated more in my life than any other book. Lore by Alexandria Bracken. Lore follows the main character, Lore. That's her name. And Lore is a part of this Greek house, but her family is dead. And the Greek houses hunt down the gods during a specific time, which I believe is 7 days every 4 years. When the gods become mortal, and when you kill these gods, you become that god, and you're respected and stuff, and you're powerful. And honestly, when I first read this book, I was so confused, because the way that it began made it seem like there was supposed to be a book before it, and there's not. Like, the author just decided that we already knew what was all happening, and I did not. And I don't know if this was just me and everyone else understood perfectly and I'm just dumb, which is possible, but that's how my wonderful experience with this book started. Going farther into the book, I was okay with everything. I was okay with all that was happening, but once I got a little deeper, I started to hate it. Not only was it boring, but there was so much action, not a lot of dialogue, or really anything interesting. And there was this one part in it that made me hate the book even more, where Laura chops off one of the bad guy's thumbs, and the love interest is making her feel guilty about it. Like,
This is a kill Laura and all that bullcrap.
and then they're arguing, and then suddenly they're kissing. Yeah. I was so mad at that scene that it just made the book worse. And I think out of the entire book, the only parts that I actually liked were the character that I actually loved, which was Laura's gay best friend, Miles, and I rightfully think he was the best character. He deserved more lines in book time, and deserved a better slow burn with the guy he ended up kissing, because the relationship was literally so sudden. I had to sit and stare at a wall for seconds, feeling bad for poor little Miles. However, to give a little mercy to this book, I can see why people did like it, especially Percy Jackson addicts who were trying to find something to fill the void after finishing all the Percy Jackson and Olympics books, and all the people who just like Greek mythology or just genuinely loved this book, but it wasn't for me. Rating it, I'd give it a 0.5 stars, and the little 5 is for Miles. Just Miles. Age rating, I'd say 14-15. The romance is clean and there are swear words, and she does say the F word close to the end of the book, but that might not bother people. But I'm just giving you a little forewarning. So, yeah.